Hey, well, what's up, Colliders? Daniel here, and Pixar's back with a movie about friendship and sea monster, and I happen to be a fan of both of those things, so I was looking forward to checking out this movie, streaming exclusively on Disney+. I saw it, so let's talk about it. So Pixar's, I think rightly so, developed a real well-earned reputation for they're kind of the goats when it comes to kind of animated movies. If you think kind of a lot of the classics over the last 15 years or so, most of them are all Pixar movies. Up and Toy Story and Ratatouille and all these movies. They've been cranking out great films for a long time, kind of exploring regular kid stuff like the human self-consciousness and metaphysical dualism and all those things that questions kids are asking these days. Luca kind of seemed like a unique story, maybe not for a kids movie, but for a Pixar movie, kind of a more simple, stripped down, just sort of looking at sea monsters, kind of more fantastical. It didn't seem like it was as maybe as zany or crazy as some of the more recent Pixar movies. And I think one of the ways I think I would describe Luca is that it's probably an average Pixar movie, which is proof that even an average Pixar movie is probably better than 95% of the animated films that we get these days. This is a good movie. It's not a classic. It's not the next, the big thing, the next Toy Story or any of those sort of movies. I don't know if this is going to be one that people really remember, for a long time. And I think even just sort of the stigma of being straight to streaming, dropping straight on Disney+. I don't know if it's going to ever get as much buzz as some of, in general, a Pixar movie probably should get if it had the full theatrical release and kind of under normal circumstances. But this is a good movie, and I think some of its sort of simplicity and kind of stripped down nature is actually refreshing. And I found, I have no problem recognizing that Soul and some of the more recent Pixar movies, are just artistically they're great. They're not kids movies. They're just great movies and works of art. But I've kind of been losing some of my enjoyment from them. Just finding them a little too complicated, a little too kind of shooting high. And just kind of losing just some of that simple fun, just dealing with maybe concepts that are just a little heavy. And I think because of that, I think I probably responded to Luca maybe more positively than a lot of people have, because it is sort of a simple story. And again, the plot of this is it's nothing crazy. It's a literal fish out of the water story. A sea monster comes onto land for the first time, and again, as in the story, when he's dry, he transforms into look like a regular boy. Only when he's wet does he kind of look like a sea monster. He makes a fellow sea monster out of water, and really it's just the story of their kind of budding and developing friendship. It reminds me of just sort of spending a nice kind of leisurely summer day growing up as a child. Again, it's set in Italy, so a lot of Italian culture, and there's not a whole lot of even drama or high stakes. There is some, as the movie progresses, it ramps up a little bit. But even like the antagonist of this film and kind of what the main objective is doesn't even kind of become clear or show up until over 30 minutes into the movie. The first 30 minutes, again, if you're expecting a lot of like underwater and what's the culture of the sea monsters, you really get none of that. You start off in the water, and for about the first 30 minutes, you're just watching these two kids. I don't know how old they're supposed to be, maybe 11, 13, somewhere in that range. And you're just sort of watching them hang out, build a bike, explore this new world that they're unfamiliar with, learn to trust each other, eventually, maybe some jealousy. And again, it's a very simple story, and I think maybe as far as just like the movie goes, some of your mileage out of this is going to be based on whether that's a positive thing or if that's not a positive thing. If again, there's the flip side of some of the simple story is not a whole lot happens. There's not a whole lot of big stakes or zany. There's not this crazy globe-trotting adventure. Or it's just sort of these two kids hanging out, becoming friends. Exploring this kind of the seaside Italian villa, and just really some kind of relatable, this life experiences that we've all had growing up, and that's about it. But again, for me, I think the simplicity of it is definitely to its advantage, and I think it allows it to tell a very kind of refreshing, kind of subdued, but extremely relatable, character-centric story. As far as content to consider, kind of on the surface, there's none of it. There's no profanity. The closest this movie gets is like one of the characters, Luca, tells his friend Alberto to shut up at one point. If you're a parent, don't want them to hear that. That's as far as they go. That profanity, violence, no violence. Again, this is an animated film. Some people fall and they fight, but there's no blood or anything. And as far as sexuality, I would say there's none. I'll get into just in a moment sort of some of the themes where maybe some of that comes to play. But as far as like nudity or sexuality or innuendos and some of that, there's nothing for, I think, a parent to be concerned about having their child watch. As far as the themes in this movie, it's pretty clear that the sea monsters are a metaphor, that they're intended to kind of be a metaphor. What's not as clear, not as certain, is sort of what they're supposed to be a metaphor of. And I think a lot of the kind of the surrounding discussion of the release of this film has been very much centered on analyzing this film as like a LGBTQ allegory, a lot of kind of the gay undertones, and again, a lot of the main news outlets and reviews have very much latched on to this idea that this is sort of the sea monsters are a metaphor for kind of coming out and embracing your LGBTQ identity. If you view the film through that lens, it is easy to make that allegory work. Again, I'm of the belief you can make almost any metaphor allegory work if you try hard enough. But again, the central premise of this movie, two male characters kind of coming out of the water, kind of embracing this friendship, hiding who they are, their identity, for fear of what the world will think of them. And again, you have scenes where they're kind of, they got arm in arm, and they're developing this close relationship. And there's various little throwaway lines or scenes that you can, if you want to, you can kind of make it represent something. And again, I think if you're coming at this film looking for that, looking for that metaphor, you're going to find it, and you're not going to have to look all that hard to find it. So again, that is out there, and I get why so much of the discussion has centered around that. But I think, as I approach this film, kind of looking, as a Christian, kind of thinking through it, just because it's possible, just because that's a possible interpretation, by no means means that it's the only interpretation. And I think the director himself, kind of, as she was talking about this film before it came out, said, they're kind of a metaphor for this being different. He said he remembers, this movie is very personal, based on his own experiences with his best friend and how they kind of felt like losers and they weren't in the cool crowd. And, it's just sort of learning to accept that they're different and just sort of enjoy their summers, enjoy their friendship. So again, I think, from his standpoint, it wasn't necessarily intended to be, him and his friend aren't in a gay relationship or anything like that. So I think, being different, some of the LGBTQ stuff is maybe one manifestation of sort of the difference and kind of living an experience that as an outsider, but it's clearly not the only one. I think even just Christianity, being religious in a culture, can be seen as that, being socially awkward, being shy, maybe being disabled in some ways. There's a lot of different ways that this, you can kind of take this metaphor for being different and kind of learning, to accept that and not care so much about what society thinks and the culture thinks. And I think, as a Christian, there's a lot in there that we can affirm, that is a message that matters. That is a message as a parent that I think my kids should learn. So I hope that I hope a lot of Christians aren't maybe too squeamish or kind of buy into that, this is the only interpretation. This is definitely kind of this sort of gay allegory. Because I think the general theme of just being different is really relatable to any of us, kind of regardless of what worldview we're coming at this film in. Kind of a second theme that I noticed that's sort of subtle, but kind of weaves throughout. And I think a lot of kind of these fish out of water stories tend to be sort of this theme of discovery, and you're sort of out of your familiar surroundings, and you're kind of learning about the world. And Luca is very much like that. It follows suit with that. And where Luca's, he's sort of this sheltered sea monster, hasn't been out of water, and he's now kind of thrust above land, and everything like ice cream and motorcycles and spaghetti and all these things these are new experiences for him. And a lot of my enjoyment, I think, is sort of the enduring kind of charming nature of this film is just sort of watching this lovable kid experience sort of the simple things in life that we take for granted. And there's a really interesting scene in this. They make friends with a girl on land, a human girl. The two male friends do, and at one point she's talking with Luca, and Luca's grown up to believe that, and he's been told that the stars and the sun they're fish and they're swimming out in the ocean. And she starts to inform him, pulls out some science books that no, they're not fish. That's sort of a silly mindset. They're actually balls of gas. And he kind of keeps pestering her, like, well, what's beyond the stars, and what's beyond the solar system, and what's beyond the universe? And she keeps answering to eventually she kind of reaches a point where she's like, I don't know. I don't know what's beyond this. That's all that this science kind of book has to tell us. And I think in some sense, this sort of theme could have been portrayed in a very kind of negative Darwinian sense of, hey, this sort of ignorant dummy that believes that, some superstitious belief about fish, and, now science is going to come and correct him and tell him the truth. And it very much could have gone that way, kind of like Smallfoot, the animated film, did in 2018, very kind of militantly kind of scientific and anti-religious, but Luca doesn't do that. And I think it leaves, kind of like Soul did last year, it leaves room for religion, for God. It acknowledges that, hey, the sky is not made of fish, but at some point we do reach the end of what we know. There is sort of this unknown, and I think kind of rather than treating it, kind of demystifying sort of his experience, that kind of science and some of the stuff that his friend teaches him kind of amplifies his wonder and mystery at this created universe that that there's more to discover. And I found it a cool theme. I thought it was, they're not trying to preach Christianity necessarily. I know some of the execs at Pixar are professing Christians, but just sort of leaving room open to this kind of film about wonder and kind of learning about the universe, and while also acknowledging that at some point we kind of reach the end of what we know, and it does become kind of a faith in the unknown. So in the end, again, like I said, I think it's not going to be a classic. I can't see Luca the character, being super popular on like parades at Disneyland, and I don't think he's going to become kind of into that kind of cultural zeitgeist of sort of these animated films. But I think it's just a good film that captures a lot, kind of resonates within us in a very kind of nostalgic sense. I found myself kind of thinking back to my own just summer days as growing up, and kind of thinking about the friends that I kind of spent those days with. And kind of as I was trying to process this film, I think, if you think back to like summer vacations, now and then you kind of get to go to Disneyland, you get to go to the beach. But for the most part, most of your summers is sort of spent just sleeping in, hanging out, making memories. And I think Luca isn't a Disneyland vacation kind of Pixar film like some of them are. It is more the latter, just, hey, you put it on, you just enjoy it, then you kind of go on with your day, and it's not something that's going to stick with you for a long time. But again, I think thinking back my own growing up, some of those sort of carefree days were some of the best and most memorable ones. So I don't think it's anything against the movie that it's not an all-time classic. That's an impossible standard. But I think if you just take this movie for what it is, maybe kind of block out some of the noise, some of the stuff that's being kind of trying to forced on this movie from the outside, maybe the secular culture. I think there's a lot for Christians to latch onto and just enjoy kind of the beauty of this animated film. But again, if you guys have seen, again, this is streaming exclusively, I believe, on Disney Plus, so you got to be a subscriber to watch it as of now. But if you guys have checked this out, maybe you've watched it with your kids, just watched it on your own, you love animated films, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. Is this a film that kind of lived up to your expectations? Is this one that's going to fly under the radar? Did you find it slow? Did you find it just sort of not inventive enough? Or were you more like me and you just enjoyed kind of the slow pace and low stakes and kind of more character-focused aspects of this film? I'd love to hear what you guys think and just love to discuss some of this with you guys. Again, if you guys haven't done so, encourage you guys subscribe to our channel, like this video, keep up with what we're doing. We got a lot of video reviews, movie reviews coming up. Again, summer movie season is upon us, so we'll be putting out a lot of content based on that. And again, we do our live streams every Tuesday at noon Eastern time, so we'd love to have you guys jump on that with us and just talk about pop culture and Christianity and all that good stuff. But I want to thank you guys for watching. Hope you'll continue to collide with your world for Christ.